No person can be unmoved by today's deliberations concerning Communist China's ongoing and brutally coordinated campaign of genocide against the minority Uyghurs and other Turkic Muslims inside its borders. We've heard details of family separation, arrests and show trials, mass detention, campaigns of gang rape, forced injections, widespread slave labor, concentration camps, and mass murders, all under China's state police. Credible estimates place a number of Uyghurs in concentration camps at over 1 million. The world hasn't witnessed anything like it since the mid to late 20th century. We say never again at solemn occasions when reflecting on past evils. We say it because it is important. It is also meaningful. But saying never again is also relatively easy to say. This vote in our parliament, declaring an important country to be guilty of genocide, will not be easy, because the vote will have consequences, both in rallying or even discouraging others, and of course on Canada's federal government. If successful, Parliament's vote will inform the public, our constituents, of China's odious actions. It could propel other legislatures in other democracies to make similar declarations. It might even offer some comfort to those being persecuted that a parliament hears them. And it could finally compel Canada's federal government to face facts and act in the name of our shared Canadian values. Should the Trudeau government ignore the evidence and vote against the motion on these crimes, it will provide sanctuary to China's Communist Party. A vote against this motion isn't an expression of neutrality, nuance, or high-mindedness. Rather, a no vote is a highly visible shrug to Uyghurs and a haven for the tactics of the Chinese Communist Party. And so, I implore other members of this House to take a stand for the persecuted and against this genocide, to back up statements of never again with a vote of affirmation to this motion in Parliament. I dread the Trudeau government will remain silent, mostly because the alternative is hard. Voting yes would require subsequent government action in opposition to China's atrocities. Take a look. The government's position is to call for an independent investigation by sending observers to Xinjiang to determine what is happening. But the foreign minister and the prime minister know Beijing will never agree to this. It is an empty statement. I'm also distressed the right path will be sidestepped for the easy path because the Liberal government has both been weak and cowardly elsewhere in its dealing with the People's Republic of China. China's Communist Party is so determined to control Uyghurs that they are spending billions of dollars on facial recognition devices, and electronic spying, and coercive DNA collection to track their every move. Uyghurs live under a totalitarian system that controls them down to their DNA. China's Huawei has been complicit in developing this technology. Canada's security services have warned the federal government about the risks and dangers to Huawei poses to Canada and our freedom. Yet the Liberal government won't ban them as our allies have done. A government unwilling to ban Huawei is not likely to hold the People's Republic of China to account today. And it's not just high-tech surveillance. Uyghurs are also forced into labor camps to produce products for exports to the world. Uyghurs are electrocuted to meet production quotas. These crimes against the Uyghurs are inhumane, as international NGOs and labor groups around the world have reported and demonstrated. In July of last year, I highlighted this mistreatment of Uyghurs in labor camps. I called on the Global Affairs Minister to launch an independent investigation into forced labor camps operating in China's Northwest Province. Also for Canada's United Nations ambassador to work to reverse Beijing's appointment to a seat on the consultative group of the United Nations Human Rights Council. Sadly, the government didn't act, even though it was widely reported that the Chinese Communist Party was using forced Uyghur labor in Xinjiang factories and selling these made in China goods and materials to global brands around the world. Now, when the government finally responded, it was in January by the outgoing Global Affairs Minister, on the very day he was moved to another ministry. Ottawa feebly acted by announcing their intention to support tougher restrictions on products being exported from Xinjiang. But the apparent tough talk lasted less than 30 minutes before a new minister was in charge. And even that talk by the outgoing minister was thin gruel. Unlike other international allies who are taking tougher action to root out forced labor in commercial supply chains, the Trudeau government will not impose financial penalties on companies that do not comply. Next, the Trudeau government has spent the past 6 years extolling and overstating the importance of China.
Speaker, on a point of order, please.
Two.
The Honourable Parliament Secretary on a point of order. Go ahead.
Yes. Yeah, Mr. Speaker, not on once or twice or three times, but on several occasions, the member keeps on referring to the Prime Minister by name as opposed to title. He's an experienced member. I'm sure he can appreciate that there is a rule that's against that, that's been there for many, many years.
I thank the honourable member. Yes, I didn't notice it myself, but I take the honourable parliamentary secretary at his word, and I know the honourable member for New Brunswick Southwest will take note of that for the remainder of his remarks. The honourable member.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. Apologies to that breach. The federal government has spent the last 6 years extolling and overstating the importance of China to our nation's well-being. They have wrongly promoted economic relations with the totalitarian regime as a key tenet of Canada's foreign policy. It called for a free trade agreement without answering how a free country like Canada can trade freely with a non-market economy like China. It tried to work with China on developing a vaccine, but instead, our health data was stolen and Canada lost months working to secure vaccines from reliable sources. As well, the Liberal government has largely been silent on Beijing's actions to crack down on democratic expression beyond expressions of concerns and regret. This is the wrong approach. Communist China should be labeled a perpetrator of genocide and be viewed as an outcast state. As I said, it will not be easy. We have more friends in mainland China than perhaps we realize. People that want the same freedoms that they see in Taiwan and until recently Hong Kong, before Beijing snuffed those freedoms out. Now more than ever, Canada needs a principled foreign policy that promotes freedom, democracy, human rights, and the rule of law. In conclusion, I must admit my hope is eternal. Some Liberals have stood up and said enough. This includes the Liberal member from Scarborough-Gilwood, the previous speaker. I applaud his courage, which is long-standing, and his position on these issues is well known. We can see today that more Liberal MPs realize they are on the wrong side of history. It is why we increasingly hear them say, as a way to excuse their past errors and judgment, that today's China is not the same as China of 2 years ago. Now, of course, this is nonsense. What changed? 2 years ago, this Liberal government was mugged by reality when 2 Canadians were illegally detained by China. No, today's China is the same China that cracked down on students in Tiananmen Square 22 years ago. It is the same China that, after being admitted to the World Trade Organization, failed to adhere to its commitments to liberalize and open up. It is the same China that imprisons its citizens and denies them freedoms of speech and press. More recently, it is the China that has illegally expanded its territory throughout the South China Sea and claims much of that sea as its territory. Its pursuit of a predatory posture regarding our open economy is well known. It openly steals our technology and research. And let's not forget the hundreds of millions of Chinese citizens on the mainland that are denied the right to choose who will govern them. As an aside, democracy isn't alien to Chinese people. They are acted on and upheld by Taiwan, a small nation of 24 million people with democratic freedoms that mirror our own in Canada. I could go on about Beijing's recent belligerence, but I've made my points. To say today's China is nothing like yesterday's China is to ignore the history of its recent history under the communists. But if my honorable Liberal colleagues believe today's China is acting in an uncivilized and unbecoming fashion, what are they prepared to do about it when we vote? I hope it is not more nothing. Or will they vote Monday on today's facts, which is China is committing genocide against ethnic and religious minorities? Never again? We will see. Canadians will all see when that vote is called.
We'll go to questions and comments. We've only got 4 minutes for this, so I'm going to ask honourable members to keep their questions and responses brief. Questions and comments. We'll first go to the Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Government House Leader.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Speaker. The member says that China today has not changed at all from previous years. My question to him is, why does he believe the Harper administration entered into a secret trade agreement without any form of parliamentary perusal or consultation when there were human rights violations back then?
For New Brunswick Southwest.
Thank you. It is my hope that today's government will repeal that agreement and move away from it.
Questions and comments? The Honourable Member for l'Honorable Député de Shefford.
Merci beaucoup. The Honourable Member for Shefford. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank my colleague for his speech. Well, there seems to be a consensus when it comes to human rights violations among the Uyghurs. We've heard from a survivor of the Kazakh war camps. She was detained in Xinjiang and accused of being a terrorist. She refused to accept these charges, and she was then held in a prison where she was tortured, raped, and forced to swallow unknown medication. With that type of incident in mind, I would ask my colleague, well, it's all very well to accuse the Liberal government, but under the Harper government, nothing was done. What has changed? After all, human rights in China has been an issue for a long time.
West.
Oui, écoute, je suis totalement d'accord avec.
Well, listen, I completely agree with my colleague. I completely agree. This is a problem that's been around for a long time. The former government took many decisions, some of which I agreed with, and others where I now think that mistakes were made. Now there's a vote coming up on Monday, and we need to think about what we're going to do now to change our relationship with China. And I hope that this motion will be adopted, and I hope that the government of Canada will respect the motion and will take action accordingly to ensure that our Canadian values are respected, and to ensure that we act seriously towards China.
And the Honourable Member for Hamilton Centre.
Speaker, and we've heard a lot today about courage and having the courage to stand up for human rights. And so my question through you to the Honourable Member is, will he and his Conservative caucus keep this same energy and this same focus on courage for Palestinians and for the Muslims that are in the Assam region of India, for people in Myanmar and other human rights across the world, or are they only fixated on the Chinese government?
Honourable Member for New Brunswick Southwest.
Thank you. No, not at all. I welcome future debates in the House on those issues as well. I share the member's concern. China is somewhat different because China also poses a clear danger to Canada's economic well-being as well as our security. So it is twinned with its human rights violations, with its undemocratic and its proprietary aggressive approach to its relation with Canada and other democracies.